All right. This is a rant, which I don't usually do, but I sort of can't contain myself at this point. So, this Valentine's Day, I watched the ending to RWBY Volume 3, and what a Valentine's Day that was. Hopefully, hopefully I don't get too angry during this, because, after all, I'm not trying to be hypercritical here. Hopefully, there's genuine criticism here, because after all, I'm still trying to be optimistic at the end of all this. But, unfortunately, after what's been happening the past few days, having watched that and having just made sort of a review and been obsessed with it and looking through the comment sections and the forums on the Rooster Teeth website about what happened to Pyrrha, I could just sense the more I thought about it, the angrier I got, and the angrier I got, the more I thought about it. And it sort of goes into this whole dark side spiral of venom and evil that you don't escape from until Obi-Wan chops 3 of your legs off. So, to avoid stuff like that from happening, I'm going to release all my pent-up rage pretty much now in the hopes that it'll soothe my soul. After all, if you don't like what I have to say, please just consider that all that this is. Just somebody releasing pent-up rage. Nothing more than that. I wouldn't want to offend anyone. Anyway. So yeah. Pyrrha dies at the end of Volume 3. Shocker. Spoiler alert, by the way, although it's already in the title. Show ended. No spoilers. But seriously, spoiler alert. In not to just this, but to Game of Thrones as well. I'll mention that later, I guess. So, basically, there's a divide. In the forums, in people who are fans of the show, there's a divide about whether or not that this actually... whether or not this was sort of a good death. There's also a divide about whether this was an actual death. Whether or not she is actually dead. And there's all these theories about that, and yes, I am well aware ahead of time that Jen Brown has confirmed that Pyrrha is gone, whatever, on her Twitter. Whatever that means. Let's just mention this divide right now. The divide means nothing right now. There's too little information to actually know for sure. I could think of a good argument on either side. I don't care what Jen Brown has said, frankly. That means absolutely nothing to me. I can see people saying things to manipulate the audience, right? I could see them doing that. I can see George R. R. Martin does shit like that all the time. And this is when I'm going to bring Game of Thrones spoiler, please. And I mean the books, not the show. If you've ever read Feast for Crows without knowing what happens in Dance with Dragons, you would know exactly what I'm talking about here. Davos Seaworth, you say he's dead in Feast for Crows. They say he's dead. They say he dies. They confirm his death, etc. Then you find out in Dance with Dragons, through some weird conspiracy, he actually miraculously survived. And it's such a gut punch to the reader when they read that book, and then they bring over to the next book that is printed 9 years later, thanks JRM, to find out that it doesn't actually happen. Alright? Shit like this happens. Writers like to fuck with their audience. Newsflash, people, it happens sometimes. Right? Now, regardless of whether she's dead or not, and I'm going to assume that she is, this is still fucking with your audience, right? And I personally don't really appreciate that. And I think a little less of that could happen in general. I'm not even going to entertain some of the theories, most of the theories about how Pyrrha could somehow be alive. I've thought about more than all of them, but the more I think about it, the cynic in me has turned to just think that no, she's just dead and that's it. And nothing matters. It was meaningless, in vain, pointless, whatever. You see, the thing is, the funny thing about this is I can't, no matter what I do, I'll seem like an idiot here, right? Right or wrong, I'll seem like an idiot, because I'm either... There's two sides of this argument, right? There's two theories, one of which is correct. They're mutually exclusive. Or there's a secret third theory nobody's thought of, right? No matter what I say, I'm going to look like a complete idiot assuming any of the theories. I'm just going to assume the frankly obvious thing is that she's dead for good, which is what all the evidence seems to point towards. Most of the other theories don't stack up. And with this thing, I'm going to criticize, because Actually, wait. I'm going to do two things. First, I'm just going to look at the events that happened and deconstruct them and criticize them, because honestly, if this was the send-off that Pyrrha gets, wasn't very good. That's part one. Part two, I'll actually, I'll do the optimistic thing, and I'll try to talk about what I hope, or what I think Rooster Teeth meant when they wrote this, when they made this, what they constructed, the subtext, what's between the lines and what's actually not being said, and interpret this in as optimistic a way as I possibly can. But honestly, where I am right now, it's very hard to be optimistic. Right. So, I didn't like the fact that they killed off Pyrrha. Now, part of that could be personal. I really liked Pyrrha. I liked her. She was probably my favorite character in the entire show. Probably not counting maybe Torchwick, or the villains, who happens to die as well. It's a great day for the characters I like. Anyway, not important. I don't care who your favorite character is. I don't think the criticism here stands on its own. But basically, everything that happened felt everything that happened to her this season, leading up to her death, felt unmotivated, unwarranted, just unfathomable almost, and then unmourned and just utterly meaningless, pointless, and as a lot of people on the forums pointed out, off. Something is very odd about what happened, very strange. Now maybe that's intentional, maybe there are hints, maybe there's something subtle that we haven't noticed, or maybe Rooster Teeth just made it off, or maybe that's just your interpretation, in other words. Maybe it wasn't off, maybe it was clear-cut and we're all just stupid, or we're not stupid and Rooster Teeth just made it off because they didn't know how to write the ending. I don't know, I'm not going to be too critical. But basically there's that. The additional problem is a more systemic one, and it has to do with how the theme of RWBY has changed, especially in this season, especially following episode 6. By episode 7 forward, the theme pretty much drastically went from, happy fun times to hellhole somewhere across between a violent anime and Sin City. So, you're going to analyze whether there's a problem with that whole process, by all means. Shows do that, and it's not always pretty, and it does deter some people, right? It's no surprise that Grey Haddock had to put in a message to tell people, hey, wait, guys, there's violence coming. It's surprising to me that actually happened. It's no surprise. Kids were attracted to the show because looking at volumes 1 and 2, it was pretty happy-go-lucky. There's nothing bad could possibly happen, right? But let's get to the meat of this thing, alright? So Pyrrha is killed. And she's killed in the stupidest way possible. So let's go back to the beginning. This whole arc began when she is arbitrarily selected to become the next Fall Maiden. Why? Just right off the bat, I can already just be skeptical and nitpicky and question, why was she chosen for this job? Now, I know, that's a nitpick, and maybe there's a good reason for it. Maybe we haven't known. Again, maybe there are reasons for everything, and it's all just subtle and tucked away. But seriously, this is something that should be addressed, if that is the case. Because really, why was she chosen? Right? Is she particularly that more powerful? I mean, I know the whole Achilles parallel. She's supposed to be untouchable, just like Achilles. But honestly, we haven't seen Pyrrha be OP as much as we've simply been told that she is. Right? Even looking at the Juniper team's progress, Nora has been way more effective in taking out bad guys than Pyrrha. She was the one that took out that Scorpion with her move. She was the one that did all that damage during the tournament. I mean, in terms of who's carrying the team, purely just looking at it, it's clearly Nora. What has Pyrrha done, really, other than just everyone saying how good she is? Oh, she took out Cardin's team. Okay, whatever. Right? And it's saying rather than, it's telling rather than showing. Right? Talking about how good Pyrrha is. Besides that, that first episode of Volume 2, you have RWBY takes out all of Team Juniper with her one spinny move tornado attack. Right? So unless we're going to mark that off as non-canon, I really don't see how you could justify Pyrrha as the strongest, wisest, most warrior-like person. Right? Why not RWBY? She's the one with the silver-eyed, metallic power of godliness or whatever, right? What justifies this choice? Now, granted, in the optimistic section, which I'll do later, I'll explain why this choice may have been warranted. There are perhaps reasons, but on the fly of it, it's odd. It's an odd choice for Ozpin to even make. I feel skeptical. Like, if she's a first-year, second-year student or whatever, are there no other students that are good in this academy? Are there any students that are good besides Teams Juniper and Ruby? Or do we not have the budget to get something like that across? I mean, just not being critical, it's a serious question. Here's the thing. So, okay, then that happens. Then they build this whole thing up as if it's her choice, as if she has to make some big choice. And I, in my review, which I haven't put out yet, but I've already pointed out how I'm skeptical as to whether or not that's actually a big choice. Again, being optimistic, I can imagine that being a serious choice, but it's not really shown. It's not really justified. It's slightly sort of kind of implied, but that's it. So let's move on to the actual last episode, and this is where shit completely goes down. Ozpin is fighting Cinder, and he tells Pyrrha and John to go away because they'd only get in the way. He tells them to get the others. The tower can't go down. Ozpin mysteriously vanishes. They cease or hear Pyrrha going to the top of the tower. They assume Ozpin has failed. Pyrrha pushes John into the locker, and it launches him away, and then she decides to go fight Cinder. Why? What was the purpose of this choice? Now, again, I know this is going to sound like a nitpick, but really, can we deconstruct the thought process here? Because for this to have any significance, there is a lot that has to be going inside this girl's head at this point. Rather, what it looks like is she just makes a choice to kill herself, pretty much. As John points out, there's no way you can beat her. You know how powerful she is. Did Pyrrha think, though, okay, Cinder's aura is depleted, given the fight with Ozpin. Maybe I can beat her. But that's taking a chance. And besides, furthermore, there's an even bigger question, which is, what is the point of even fighting Cinder? What's going to happen when you beat her? Okay, I guess you'll get the Fall Maiden's power. Okay, whoop-de-fuck. What happens next? What happens after you've gained the Fall Maiden's power? There's still a giant dragon circling the school. Are you really going to stop the dragon from destroying the tower? I know that's the purpose here. Ozpin said the tower's going to go down. We got to protect the tower, right? But, I mean, did she honestly think that she could take on Cinder and the dragon, especially when her aura might already be partially depleted given her fight with Penny that happened like an hour ago? Does aura come back immediately, or is that just a flaw? See, I don't know, but the point is, this whole situation needs to be, I don't know, but for this situation to resonate, for it to actually have impact, for me not to be pissed off at it, every subtle aspect of it has to be thought out to the most detailed, way as possible. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. Otherwise, what it looks like is you're throwing Pyrrha away into the meat grinder. She might as well have just slit her own throat with that spear, or jumped off a cliff. That's exactly what she did. She's like, I'm just going to jump off a cliff now. My character has no value anymore. That's what this is about. So the question really is, what was her choice about? Why did she decide to do that? I mean, my true Pyrrha fanboyism may be showing now, but really, answer the question. Is there something I'm missing here? I mean, let's just break this thing down, okay? She either thought, people who are defending this were saying, yes, sometimes there's brutal death, and that's just life. That's what happens, and some people were saying, but this is just like Game of Thrones. The people on the other side of the argument, they're saying, we have enough of this shit in Game of Thrones. Why can't we have a happy ending? To be completely honest, I don't actually agree with those people. I don't think the Game of Thrones comparison is fair. And let me explain why. There's 4 possible situations when a character is going into an encounter of some sort. Either they know they're going to die, or they think they're going to die, or they think that their chances of survival are uncertain, and they die. They think their chances of survival are slim, and they live. They think that there's no chance that they're going to die, and they live. They think that there's no chance they're going to die, and they die. Now, Game of Thrones has plenty of that last one, that 4th category, right? Again, spoiler alerts, Eddard Stark, Robb Stark, Joffrey, all these people, when they get wiped off, they don't get wiped off through battle, they don't get wiped off, because they know their death is coming. They get wiped out when they weren't expecting it. And that's what makes their deaths significant. That's what makes their deaths resonate with the characters, with the audience, with with the author himself, he didn't even write the Red Wedding until he was done the rest of the book, right? That's what makes it resonate. Because that's what makes it sting, because it feels like we get betrayed. Completely different scenario to what happens here, okay? There is no way Pyrrha was in that last category. No way she thought she could fight Cinder and the dragon. No way she thought she could fight Cinder and win, okay? Those last two options are out of the question. At best, she thought she could hold her off for long enough until Ironwood and the other guys showed up. But who knows how long that would have taken. And when the dragon destroyed the tower, the CCTS went down. So why did she keep fighting Cinder at that point? She had already lost. She failed her mission. The CCTS was down. She could have just jumped off the roof or whatever. Or sailed off the roof while magnetically controlling one of those gears or whatever. What would have stopped her? Maybe Cinder would have chased her down, but what was the point of continuing to fight then? If you value your life, why continue to fight? So then, we have the suggestion that Pyrrha did not value her life then, if she chose, right? Or that she thought she was going to die. She knew what she was going to die. Again, like I said, she couldn't be in those last two categories. She must have been in the first two categories. But this is a strange, peculiar situation, because the Pyrrha that I knew would have maybe sacrificed herself for her friend, for John, for Ruby, for some of her friends. Maybe she would have sacrificed herself to protect the people she loved. She would have sacrificed herself for honor and virtue. She would have sacrificed herself then to give in to some lower standard of ethic. She would not. But what happens here is she sacrificed herself for nothing. For literally nothing. Right? This is more than she didn't just die in vain. She didn't just go up there, try to do something and fail. No. It's worse than that. She went up there and died for no reason. Zero reason. She had no reason to be there. Right? It's like they took her and just decided to just smash her over and over again until they killed her. They just threw her off a cliff, like I keep saying. And to make matters worse, you don't even get a chance to internalize any of it. Immediately afterwards, the scene completely shifts, and now Ruby's waking up in her bed, and everybody's forgotten about Pyrrha. Why does Ruby forget what happened? Why is her memory gone? She remembers Yang. She remembers what happened up to that. Why is her memory gone? Or is that just some sort of trope? I guess it has to be some sort of trope, but it's kind of a gut punch, because I'm sitting here and I'm just like, wait, what? Pyrrha just died? Hold on a moment, I want to take this in a bit. I mean, this is like the Red Wedding just happened here. Maybe end the show on that. Don't go into this other shit. Who gives a fuck about that right now? Who gives a fuck what Ruby's going through in this moment? Right? I have to grieve, goddammit. What about this? And just watching it back, looking at Ruby's reaction, the whole scene made no sense. Okay, just Ruby gets up onto the tower, and then, right after she gets up, then Pyrrha gets shot through the chest. And Ruby just sits there watching Pyrrha as Cinder slowly walks over to her, touches her head, and she disintegrates with a weird flash of light. Alright? It's like, why that gap? What, is Ruby just gonna sit there as Pyrrha's shot in the heart? She's not gonna tackle Cinder or anything? No. She's just gonna sit there and watch while this whole thing unfolds. And, and then she wakes up. She doesn't remember this for some reason. We have some boring old dialogue with Bernie about just like, oh, you did a number in the... Okay, whatever. Like, I want to go back to Pyrrha. I want to find out what happened there. But why doesn't Ruby want to find out what happened there? She asks Crow, what happened to Pyrrha? And Crow's just like, she's gone. And what? That's the end of it? Like, did Ruby not wonder, oh, what does that mean? Why is she gone? What does gone mean? Is she dead? Is she disappeared? Is she mortal? Is her soul in Valhalla? Like, who the fuck knows? Is she not interested into what went down there, or is she just used to people disintegrating into ash in a bright flash of light before her eyes? But look at how much she cries as well. Right? This is ridiculous. Like, when she hears about Pyrrha's death, it's like, sniffle, sniffle, okay, back to business. That is Ruby's reaction. She barely has any emotion of grief. She has like 2 seconds where she feels grieving, and then they go back to that weird old conversation about Ruby's silver eyes. Watch the scene again if you don't believe me. It feels such like, oh yeah, it's like, we have to mention that Pyrrha thing. We just killed her off. Please, let's not forget about this completely. It felt like such a disservice to the character. Like, she just disintegrated and nobody gives a shit. Right? They barely spend a second talking about it before it's back to business as usual. Like, what a disgrace. Jesus Christ. And then, I just, like... I just can't picture in my mind is, like, how no one... Ruby had more of a reaction when Penny died. She was on her knees bawling when Penny died. Everybody had a reaction when Penny died. Nobody gives a fuck when Pyrrha dies. Now, Pyrrha's much less important than Penny after all. Penny's just a robot that could be rebuilt in a flash, but Pyrrha is, you know... Who gives a fuck about her, right? Again, you could be saying, and then we see John and Nora and Ren, and they're all just like, hey, Ruby, let's go on an adventure. Happy, happy, happy time. Lord of the Rings, fucking walking off to the next part of the journey, right? And then we're gonna get meeting some, like, anime bullshit the next time. I know I'm being too critical, and I know they're probably gonna show people grieving in Volume 4, okay? But it just felt so insulting. It felt so insulting, you know, this is like an important character, you know, you've supposedly constructed this whole elaborate plot and significant death, and then you play it off like it just doesn't make a goddamn difference to anyone, right? They didn't just play it off like it was meaningless to Pyrrha, they played it off like it was meaningless to everyone, and that's what I don't like. Okay? And if you're gonna come out and tell me, yeah, well, sometimes death is just meaningless, well then fuck you. If that's the case, then you can just bring her back to life, and that's just as meaningless, right? If her death was meaningless, then who gives a shit if she's dead? Why not just bring her back to life? That's just as meaningless. That's what meaninglessness means, right? Is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. You threw out the rules out the window as soon as you say everything about her death was meaningless. See, that's the point, is there's no such thing as general meaninglessness that permeates everything. It's the same reason I don't like nihilists. I think all nihilists are liars, okay? That goes into deeper philosophy, which I won't talk about, but it's true. There's no such thing as a general, you know, absolute meaninglessness that permeates everything, and this is one of those moments where you show it. No, that doesn't exist or happen, right? Pyrrha's death may have been meaningless to her, but it would not have been meaningless to the other people in the story, and it would not be meaningless to the fans. In fact, the whole point of a death of a main character is that it is meaningful to the fans, okay? Robb Stark, Eddard Stark, all the Starks getting slaughtered in Game of Thrones isn't dramatic because it's meaningless. It's dramatic because it's meaningful to us, and it's meaningful to the setting, alright? It's cruel, it's sadistic, but it's still meaningful. There's no such thing as meaninglessness. Do you comprehend? But besides that, this tried to play it off as if it was meaningless. No, as if it was, in fact, meaningless. As if nobody cared. That nobody should care. That, like, as if there's more important things going on right now. I mean, Ruby's silver-eyed power can wait, I'm afraid. Jesus Christ, I mean, just rant about this thing for ages. And my point here is stronger than it's like, it's not enough to say that Pyrrha needs to be mourned. It's more than that. She doesn't just need to be mourned. She needs to have an impact. Okay? She needs to have an actual effect. The Pyrrhic victory, right? And no, unlocking Ruby's powers doesn't count. She didn't know that was going to happen. That was pure chance. She needs to have an actual, tangible impact on something in the story. Preferably on John and his aura and his ability to use it. Okay? Something like that has to resonate. Her sacrifice has to resonate. Otherwise, she sacrificed herself for no reason. For nothing. Right? And that's what stings. And that's really, and moreover, let me go into the whole systemic problem, is, let's say, for worst case scenario, this was just a meaningless sacrifice for the sake of meaninglessness. Why is that a good thing? Is this really that type of show? Is this supposed to be like Game of Thrones or some horribly sadistic, violent show where sacrifices mean nothing? I mean, that type of thing does happen occasionally, but why should it happen here? Does that go in line with everything we've seen in the first two volumes? You know, the funny thing is, show a person, you know, that episode where Yang gets her arm cut off, and then show her the beginning of Volume 1, you would not guess that these two shows were the same, and if for the fact that the character models were the same. Right? You could never even tell. Or a story, show something in Volume 1 that had nothing to do with Yang, then show that scene with Yang to a person at the end of Volume 3, and have them tell, is this the same show? Other than the animation style, right? It's ridiculous. The theme has changed drastically, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it is a bad thing when it goes from this to this in an instant, right? Stuff like that. It happened in Mass Effect 3, and people didn't like it. You know, it went from this to this in an instant, and then it went oscillating back and forth near the end, where it descended into pure madness, you know. this is a thematic discontinuity, or a theme discontinuity. You know, it's where the surface of theme is not smooth in theme space. It's a mathematical term. The point is, you know, just generally, stuff like that has to be handled with tact and care. It has to be smooth. It has to be just neat. Like, I don't know how else to go it, but it has to be elegant. I'm not saying it wasn't elegant here. It was certainly more elegant here than it was in Mass Effect 3. But it was no picnic either, right? The change was quite drastic. If they had done it a little less, if they had foreshadowed it a bit more in the first earlier volumes, I mean, really, not a single violent thing happened in the first 2 volumes. Yeah, freaking Weiss gets just hit across the midsection with a revved up chainsaw, and she's perfectly fine in Volume 2. Doesn't happen here, though. Here, there's limbs being cut off, there's people being torn apart. Like, this show has descended to Sin City tier, practically. The only thing that hasn't happened to violent end is Pyrrha. Oddly enough, she didn't actually turn to dust. She turned to dust. She didn't, she wasn't ripped apart. Although, honestly, I think ripping her apart would have been more humane. At least then they could have a fucking funeral. Right now, she turns to dust and is forgotten. You know, John doesn't even have her crown. We don't even know what the fuck happened. She turns to dust. She's gone. Nobody gives a shit about her. There's no funeral, there's gonna be a memorial service, and people are gonna be wondering, what happened to Pyrrha? Where did she go? Right? How are they so certain that she's just gone and like, Ozpin, like, the only person who saw her disintegrate was Ruby, right? But then Crow says, oh, you know, yeah, she's gone. But Ozpin's disappeared. He's not gone. He's just disappeared. Well, why is there a difference there? You didn't see what happened. You don't know what happened to two. As far as you know, they were both disintegrated, right? I mean, really, it makes no goddamn sense the way they happened. There's probably a chance, this is one of the only theory that I do accept, is perhaps that Ozpin was actually disintegrated and sent over to Salem's lot. And that's exactly what happened to Pyrrha as well. Maybe, right? And then they get turned into grimified, you know, grim soldiers used by Salem to fight against their friends later on. Easily could happen. That's the one believable theory that there is. The other theories are fucking stupid. I'm sorry. The theory that Emerald saved her is retarded. There's no way Emerald could get up there. Let me dispel that theory right now. That there's only one way up onto that tower, and the elevator was down. Pyrrha used it with her magnet power to get up. So unless Emerald suddenly turns into Spider-Man, I don't know how she gets up there. Same thing with Ozpin. Granted, everybody in this story pretty much is like Spider-Man. They could jump long distances and whatever. The point is, just the billion things, just the inhumaneness of her death, the fact that she disintegrated, we don't even have a body. Like, I think it would have... I don't know if this was a censorship issue, they were afraid of showing her body. They showed Penny's body, right? That wasn't scarring enough. You know, they were afraid to show a human body lying on the ground. They didn't need to show that. They could have just had Pyrrha shot and then fall down and then flash of light, you know? And then Crow says she's gone, if this was to be her death. Having her disintegrate is just another sting because it's like, oh, it's that meaningless. Not only did she fail, not only did she die, she was turned to fucking dust. That's how pointless of a waste of fucking carbon that she was. She meant nothing. She was a pig for the slaughter. We threw her in the meat grinder and it came out as fucking red-colored Swiss cheese. I don't know. Red meat. Redhead meat. Oh my god. The point is, the circumstances of her death were off, to say the very least, and highly suspect and highly controversial and, I don't know how else to say, just wrong. They were wrong to kill her off that way. It was vile. Not only did it make no sense, considering the extenuating circumstances, but it went against Pyrrha as a character. It undermined her completely. All of a sudden, she wasn't the brave soldier fighting for her friends. She was the idiot who was fighting for nothing. That's the message that was being sent there. Because of course she had to be an idiot to fight Cinder. There's no way she could have won. There's no way she could have done anything. So she was an idiot. Plain and simple. She's either the soldier who fought for her friends and sacrificed for something, or she's an idiot who sacrificed for nothing. And this is what this felt like. That they did a 180 on her character, turned her into a moron who just fights for no reason and dies for no reason, like a grunt in the goddamn fields. That's what it felt like. And that's why this was such a goddamn disgrace. It's painful to watch the scene again, because everything, just seriously, try to watch it again thinking about how I've interpreted, do you really not see how it can be interpreted in this way? Do you not feel how off this is? That this is literally like them taking the character and just neutering her, metaphorically, neutering her, just ripping her fucking balls off, and turning her into this idiot who throws their life away for no reason, no honor, no compassion, no virtue, nothing worthy of Valhalla happened in that fight. She was a dumbass who fought and died and was turned to ash like all the other dumbasses who go against Cinder end up. That's what this felt like. Of course, that's just one possible interpretation. And that's just the cynic in me, but that's how I felt it was. And no, I pray to God that that was not the intention behind Rooster Teeth. Please, by all means, somebody put my mind at ease and let me know, did you think that was the intention behind that scene? Was that the intention behind that scene? Because thinking that was the intention behind that scene is scarring. It makes the show... It makes the show hard to watch from this point on, because it felt like they just decided to fuck with us, right? You know, they decided to blow a hole into the hull of the Arcos ship and do this for no fucking reason. For no reason other than to be shocking and gritty and controversial. I could see that happening. I could see people have done shit like this before. They've taken controversy to whole nother levels by putting garbage like this into storytelling. If this interpretation is in fact correct. So please dispel my crazy, just evil, horrible, painful thoughts that this is what they were trying to do. Please let me know, tell me that this wasn't what they were trying to do. I hope to God that this wasn't what they were trying to do. That there was still just a shroud of a respect for Pyrrha's character somewhere in there in the cold hearts of the Rooster Teeth cast. People were saying that they cried at this ending. I'm just like, how could you possibly cry at this? I was infuriated. I was shocked at first and then infuriated. How could they do this to her? This made no sense. This was them taking the character and rubbing her out. Telling us, making a big middle finger and saying, this character doesn't matter, and fuck you anybody who liked her, and fuck you anybody who's on the Arcos ship, you're all going down, and you're gonna scream to death in that cold water. Alright, then there's the second interpretation. And this one's a bit more generous, and maybe this is what they meant. Hopefully this is what they meant. And to start it off, I'm just going to read a small quote that Pyrrha says to John when they're in the Emerald Forest. For it is in passing that we achieve immortality. Through this we become a paragon of virtue and glory to rise above all. Infinite in distance and unbound by death. I release your soul and by my shoulder protect thee. Because Pyrrha is kind of spiritual. Fortunately, we don't really get to know how spiritual she is. There's a lot of telling with her and not a lot of showing. A lot of the showing unfortunately went towards the other characters. Now, I have no problem with the other characters and how much screen time, and I know there's a limit to how much screen time you can have, and honestly, I am optimistic that this was just a fluke, but Pyrrha needed more screen time. If this was the development that they were going for, if this was her spirituality that led to her demise, this character flaw that she had, then I could understand it if this was where it was all coming from. To justify that decision she made at the bottom of the tower to go fight Cinder. To justify all of that, they needed to put more work into her. Maybe 2 or 3 scenes talking about this, in passing we achieve immortality. Maybe 2 or 3 scenes talking about that. Not just, one. Right? Because this, I didn't even remember this. It wasn't until afterwards that I started doing research to really find out what could have happened that I remembered that quote. Right? Until then, it was just like, yeah, Pyrrha's dead. Who fucking gives a shit? Now let's talk about her quote about destiny. When I think of destiny, I don't think of a predetermined fate that you can't escape, but rather some sort of final goal, something you work towards your entire life. What was she working towards her entire life? Well, she was working to become a huntress. She thought her destiny was to become a huntress. She says that in the episode Destiny. And then she realizes that what that actually means is a lot different than what she thought it meant. It's not clear-cut. It involves some sacrifice. But anyway, let's rewind and go back to Season 1. Season 2, Volumes 1 and 2. Again, a few more scenes was all I'd be asking for to justify her spirituality. And more scenes showing us how kick-ass she was, not just telling us. Showing us that she was, in fact, this paragon of both fighting ability and virtue. Because really, we haven't seen Pyrrha go up against any of the villains or any other main character that we knew was good at fighting, like anyone from Team Ruby, other than that one scene in Volume 2 where she gets her ass kicked, along with the rest of Team Juniper, and also at the very end here where she fights Cinder, and when she fights Penny. Thing is, we never see Pyrrha fight anyone where where we know this is someone who's good, right? To really be able to tell that, yes, she's this superstar, amazing student, right? I couldn't tell that. They were just saying it the entire time, but it's like, you haven't shown us this. Prove to me this is true. Nora has acted more the supreme fighter than Pyrrha has. The point of doing that, the point of showing Pyrrha being kick-ass is all of this, and showing the spirituality, is it would justify the choice that Ozpin made in deciding to make her the Fall Maiden. It would justify that choice. That's my point here. That's why this is my optimistic view in how I would have written this whole situation out if I were in charge. And if money and time were no object, of course. And if I was talented, whatever. You know, if I knew the story and I had no Monty Oom's vision. This is how this should have gone down. This is how they should have built up her character, because otherwise the choice seems meaningless and trite. It seems a contrived ploy to get us to kill her, to get us to feel sad, and then to be controversial about it, and then to stick it in our faces like fucking sadists, I don't know what. But the point is, yeah, make that choice. Her whole relationship with John Arc in Volume 2 was fine. There's nothing there to be changed. She was fighting the shit out of Cardin's team, and she could take out all four of them. Okay, fine. But we have no reason to suspect that any of those guys are good at fighting. She lost fighting against Ruby in that bread fight. Okay, in the food fight. Who's to say she was good at fighting? I mean, if we had seen her spar against Yang or someone, then maybe we think, okay, she's actually a good fighter. Right? If we had actually felt, if we had more reason to think that she was the one who was carrying Team Juniper, as Crow suggests, you know, that she was the one who was actually responsible for all their victories, that basically they would have been screwed without her, right? I mean, sure, Lee and Nora are great, but without Pyrrha, they would have lost. This needed to be clear and firm from the get-go that she was the one carrying the team. So she was a superb fighter, incredibly spiritual, incredibly virtuous, so then it makes complete sense that Fate and Ozpin would choose her to become the next Fall Maiden. Remember, we don't know why exactly she was chosen to be the Fall Maiden. It might not have been just Ozpin's choice. It might have also been partially because they said something like, we think you're the one to inherit her powers or whatever. Like, I don't know exactly the whole circumstance of that, and we don't know the full the political game that was being played by Ozpin and co. But something tells me perhaps it wasn't just Ozpin's choice. But if it was just up to Ozpin's choice who becomes the next Fall Maiden, then it makes a whole lot of sense for him to have picked Pyrrha, assuming the proper build-up had been made. Next, when she makes that choice, and I'm sorry, but to me this wasn't clear in the subtext, they needed to really emphasize what a choice this was. All that they say in Episode 6 was that your life will be bound to Autumn's life. That's all they say. That's very amorphous. I have no idea what that means. They say maybe your personality will change. Maybe who you are will change. But that still means nothing. That means nothing to us. How could that mean something to Pyrrha? But for some reason, she gets all emotionally wrapped up into this idea, like she's going to become a different person. No. I would not have played this off like that at all. Sure, maybe mention she would have become a different person or whatever. She would have become, you know, her fate would have been tied to Autumn's fate. Whatever. You know, maybe. That's all poetic and nice, but they needed to focus on actual, distinct, tangible things that would have affected her life. They should have said, you won't get to be a student anymore. You won't get to participate in the tournament. You won't get to be part of Team Juniper. You won't get to see your family. We have to hide you and keep you safe from prying eyes. After all, Autumn was just attacked. The Amber was just attacked and almost killed. If now was a time as any to keep the maiden safe, it was now. So this was their contingency plan. They needed since the Fall Maiden's power had been partially stolen, they needed to transfer the rest of the power over to Pyrrha and then hide her away in some bunker deep underground so that nobody could get to her. That's what they needed to do, right? And they needed to emphasize to her that this is what they were doing. This was a very critical and serious situation, that there was no way she was going to get out of this. If she said yes, her life would never be the same. She would constantly be in hiding. It would never be the same. However, it would be doing the right thing, by the kingdom. It would be helping the kingdom out. And of course, Pyrrha chooses yes without really thinking it through. But these needed to be the terms and conditions of her life going forward with the situation. Because then I could understand her being a little trepidatious about going forward and being a little hesitant. It's like, well, wait, that means I won't get to have my team, I won't get to have my friends, won't get to have my family, won't get to be a huntress in any classical sense that I've read about in stories and fairy tales. No John, no Arcos, nothing. Furthermore, you needed to put that in there so that the audience already at that point, we already get the sense that we're going to lose this character, that we have a chance of losing this character, that she is making a choice that is probably going to end with her in a situation that is non-favorable to us. The Arcos ship is sinking. It's already in danger at this point. This needed to be prominently felt, right, throughout this season. Not even at the goddamn, halfway through. I say earlier. Maybe not as soon as season 1. Maybe let the childish, the childish serenity last a few episodes. But as soon as episode 3, emphasize this and have it build up to her place in the tournament. Of course, she didn't want to make the decision before the tournament ended because she wanted to have her last time with her friends. Maybe she wanted to see her family one last time before being sent off. Add some complexity there. And if you're going to tell me, no, this is way too hard, you're making this too serious. Oh, I'm sorry. I get to make this serious now. You fuckers decided to make this serious when you started cutting off people's hands, ripping people apart, and making it this violent bloodbath and killing off characters right, left, and center. I'm sorry, I don't mean to criticize Rooster Teeth. I love Rooster Teeth, but really, you don't get to say that I'm being too serious about this. This is the exact level of seriousness that they were going for, especially with the tone of this ending. They were making it a real goddamn story, and these are the nuances that a real story have. They have nuances and consequences like this. You don't just get to make a choice to become the Fall Maiden and have it not mean anything for your friends and family. Of course, they didn't say that, and again, maybe I'm just stupid. Maybe this was all there in the subtext, and I'm just an idiot. I couldn't sense it. But really, I somehow doubt it was there. I doubt that it was completely thought out. And if it wasn't, forgive me. But I just wanted to see it. I wanted to see the struggle, right? Because until I see the struggle, I have a trouble believing that it was there to begin with, right? In this way, I have to fill in all the blanks with my mind to actually get through this thing. Anyway, so what happens next? Then she goes up against Penny, and this was the whole brilliant plan by Cinder, and it was orchestrated beautifully, and Pyrrha is this thing she thinks she can't fail and whatever, and she's sort of, a lot's going through her mind, and she's sort of scared right now, so when she sees all those blades, she just gets frightened. She gets frightened, and then the lizard brain kicks in, and she goes into just reaction mode. She musters all of her energy and strength to just push this away so that she has time to breathe. Lo and behold, that was exactly what needed to happen. She was played beautifully to kill off Penny. Once she does that, once she kills off Penny, on top of the previous stuff that was happening to her, something changes, something cracks. All of a sudden, she has done the worst thing possible for her character to have done. She has committed a murder. Granted, it's not the worst thing possible because it was just a murder of an AI, but it's worse than that. She didn't just commit a murder. Now the Grimm are invading the city. She played right into the hands of some mysterious villain and doomed everybody. For someone like that, someone so holy and pious and devoted to their craft and devoted to just being selfless, that is a lot to take. So when she realizes what she had done and the consequences of what she had done, she sort of snapped. She went into this decision, she didn't know what to do, pretty much. And we don't really get to see any of this, to understand. We barely get to see Pyrrha's reaction to having killed Penny. There's a little bit of disbelief in her eyes, and then nothing, nothing, nothing until that whole event in the catacombs of the school happened. Right? We don't really get to see her reaction. We needed to see her reaction. Right? We needed to see her making the choice, making the decision to go off to her death, because that's what she was doing, as I've pointed out. She needed to be... All of the pieces need to be put in place right in the perfect spot for her to go off to her death. For us to see this was a person who was ready to go off to die. Right? So that it could feel justified, so that it wasn't just, hey, let's just throw her in the meat grinder because it's fun, guys, right? Let's kill off characters left, right, and center. Sorry to be critical, but really, we needed to see the choice being justified. We needed to see when Pyrrha finally understands what her destiny is. As Torchwick says, go and die like all the other hunters and huntresses. Right? That's your destiny. That was what her destiny was. She needed to realize this, right? For her to go up on that tower and fight Cinder, knowing she was going to lose, knowing that this meant her death, knowing that her family wasn't going to know what happened to her, she was going to cause pain to everyone. She needed to do this because of guilt, because she felt bad, because she felt like by not going up there, she would not be completing her destiny. She would not do the honorable thing that the Huntress would. She would do the unvirtuous thing and flee. Whereas the correct thing to do was to fight and to die. That was the right thing for her to do. She needed to die. She needed to know that she needed to die at that point. Right? Because she had failed. Everything she'd been working towards, everything she had idealized, everything that had been in her mind, that she had known and loved since a child, everything that she'd worked towards, all of the thoughts that had been swimming through her head ever since Ozpin thought, you're going to get to complete your destiny. All of that stuff from Season 1, all of that stuff from Volume 1 and 2 needed to be come back right up into this moment when she decides to get rid of John and go up into that tower, which is she needed to know that she was going to her death. She needed retribution. Okay? Just going on a death on the off chance that she could fight Cinder is not enough. She needed to know that she was going to her death. Think about the impact that would have had for a second. Think about the pathos that would have had, the meaningfulness of that. Not just, to the other characters, not just to us, but to the character itself, to Pyrrha. Think about why she went up there, why she should have done that, why she wanted to do that. As it stands, it looked as if like something she wouldn't have done. That is what I hated. And they just went into the oldest thing of just crumbling her to dust and just disrespecting the character. No, this is what the character would have done. I'm saying right now, my interpretation, this is what the character should have done. Okay? This is what the Pyrrha I know would have done. She would have gone up there, and she would have given it her all, and she would have fought Cinder to her last dying breath, because she was gonna die, because that's what Huntresses do! Get a little bit emotional. And then, after she dies, we don't need to have her crumble to dust, but whatever. Maybe we can have that. Maybe that is the send-off to a holy warrior. Now he turns into light. She gets hit in the chest. Do you believe in destiny? Sorry, before that, she asks, do you believe in destiny? That line has significance now. As it stands, that line has no meaning. That line is a waste of fucking time. Right? It's just to fill our heads with stuff. It's just like, oh, maybe this has meaning. Nope! Has no meaning. This way, this line would have had meaning. It would have had meaning because this was Pyrrha completing her destiny. This was her going off to die like a soldier is supposed to do. Let me read the quote again if you don't believe me. Where is it? For it is in passing that we achieve immortality. Through this we become a paragon of virtue and glory to rise above all. Need I say more? This was the character. This was her destiny. This line encapsulates who she was as a person. She was the one that needed to die, because that's how you become a paragon of virtue and glory. Death by battle, okay? It's a very ancient trope, but it fits the character perfectly. And by not showing that, by really sort of cutting corners and trying to demonstrate that, and honestly, part of me thinks they weren't trying to demonstrate that, they did a disservice to the character, because this is what the character was about. And by having her say a pointless line about destiny just to die is a disservice to her. It's an insult to the name of Pyrrha Nikos. Forgive me for my passion. And she dies, and then she crumbles to dust, and there's that flash of light, and that's her soul going off to Valhalla, right? To rest with the rest of the warriors, like she deserves, the warriors of old. You know, it's like Boromir's death in Lord of the Rings. I had whole Lord of the Rings flashbacks when I saw that. Boromir fighting valiantly, and then Flirt's standing over him with an arrow. And then Ruby shows up, and she sees it all go down. And, she sees it all go down, and she screams, just as she would, and then flash of light, Cinder screams, "What?" And then we hear Crow's voice, and he's like, I got you. The same thing he said in the episode, and then that's it. And then cut. Credits. End the season right there. End it right there. Make it about Ruby, and about Pyrrha, and about that moment. That moment when all the chips were on the table. Jesus Christ, make it about that. Don't make it about this other bullshit. Think about that. I know there's other elements of the story, but think about what the rest of that could have made a great intro for Volume 4. It would have made a great intro. Right? Ruby waking up in her bed, not knowing what's going on, a conversation with Crow, more elaborate maybe, about finding out what the heck's happened, some information, ending the episode with a shot of Salem talking to Ozpin, supposedly. Think about how epic that would have been. Think about how epic if they had made everything in the episode about that moment. That's how you give a character a send-off. That's how you do them justice, a main character like that. Now maybe I'm misinterpreting things. Maybe Pyrrha wasn't just that important. She was just a throwaway character. But if so, fuck that. Right? If that was the plan from the start, for her to be a throwaway character we can get rid of, then I say fuck that. I don't think that's how the show should have done with it. I think it's better to do it this way. Right? If this was original plan, then fuck the original plan, okay? Then the original plan was not better. And I'm just sorry, I have respect for Montium. Let him rest in peace. But, seriously, these people the writer doesn't always have final say on what's good for the story. They usually do. I will admit that they usually do, but not always, and this was not one of those scenarios. Alright? It would have been way better off if they did it. I could see it vividly now. Make everything about that moment so that it resonates in everyone's minds. And then we have an entire, 8 months to think about what it means and what the consequences are going to be. Rather than doing what they did, where we see the consequences and it's like nothing even happened. Nobody gives a shit. I'm sure months have passed, but that's not the point. We understand months have passed. The problem is we don't know what the fuck has happened, right? We have yet to internalize the pain of losing this character. You have barely... The characters have barely reacted. Pretty much, just by doing what they did, they made the whole episode about something else. They made it not about Pyrrha, not about that struggle, not about anything that was happening, but about some other pap, right? And that is a disservice to the character. I think if you're going to kill off a member of the main cast whom we think is supposed to be important, then you should do it the right way. You should do it where it resonates. The Red Wedding fucking resonates. Eddard Stark's beheading resonates, okay? You don't just do that shit lightly, okay? There's build up to it. There's tension. It's unexpected. Certainly it's a twist, but it's not meaningless. You see my point? I mean, at the end of the day, this is a question of, do you want us to care about this character or not? Right? And with the way that this death was done in the show, there is reason enough to think that we weren't actually supposed to care about this character. That she didn't matter, and that her sacrifice didn't matter, and that everything she was, and who she was, and what she did, made not a goddamn difference. And that sometimes that's just life. Except it's not, because life is never like that. Sometimes you fail and do, sometimes there is loss, and sometimes things seem grim, but there is never such a thing in life as everything is completely meaningless to the umpteenth degree. There is no such thing as complete meaninglessness. Because what this does is it undermines everything that we've gone through with Pyrrha and John. It says fuck you to all of that. It says none of that mattered. The only thing that matters is that it didn't matter. It was all just a trick. It was all just to fool you. It was all just to manipulate you into caring about these people before we could take them away. There is a stark difference between this and Game of Thrones, right? There's a stark difference there. When you kill off characters, it means something. When Rorschach dies in Watchmen, it means something. Characters' death means something, okay? This meant nothing the way they played it. Now, I hope that I'm just misinterpreting. That what I saw this to be, and my optimistic interpretation, is in fact what the intention was of Miles and Carrie and Gray and all those great guys, and Monty and those people, when they thought of this character and they thought of what to do with her and they decided to make all this stuff go down. I pray that that was the case. You know, for the sake of my own sanity, if not any other Pyrrha fan. But seriously, can you honestly look at what has happened here and tell me, without a shadow of a doubt, that that's exactly what they meant? That there's not a sliver of this that just seems empty and holeless and manipulative? Like what I said just now? Do you really think that my cynical interpretation of this doesn't apply? Because you see, if I'm right about the cynical interpretation, then bringing her back to life means nothing. But if I'm wrong, and in fact it was closer to my optimistic interpretation, well then there's no way in hell you can bring her back. There's no way in hell you can bring back a character who sacrificed that much. That would undermine the sacrifice. That would undermine the message. That is something you don't do. You don't bring back Eddard Stark. You don't bring back Robb Stark. You don't bring back Rorschach, characters who have fought and died and sacrificed. You don't bring back Boromir, you know? Because their death meant something. It always does. That's the only case when you don't bring a character back, is when it meant something. When it doesn't mean something, that's when you can do whatever the fuck you want. That's what not meaning something means. That's pretty much it. Again, I could have just made a huge fool of myself crying about poor old Pyrrha when really she's not even dead. She's just grimified. Who knows? Maybe Jen is just screwing with all of us with her tweets. After all, she did say in that afterbuzz that she had some big thing to announce about Ruby 2 months down the line, which she said February 4th. Right? It's February 16th now. 2 more months puts us in April 4th. Maybe that'll be an April Fool's joke. Who knows? I don't know. Right? There's also rumors where Monty said the main 8 characters won't die until Volume 8, which is interesting in its own right. But the point is, there needed to be significance here. Because if you're going to just say that there's insignificance here, then if you're going to arbitrarily say that Pyrrha's character had no significance, that her point was to not matter, then why should anyone matter? Why should Ruby matter? Why should Weiss matter? Why don't we just kill off all these characters? Why just kill them all off right now? Why not let Salem win? Who gives a fuck, right? If nothing matters, then nothing matters. Then we can do whatever we want, and it doesn't make a difference. Somehow, I feel strongly that that was not the intention. That at the end of the day, things do matter, and that the creators of the show do want us to care, right? They do want us to care about Pyrrha dying. They want us to be sad. They want us to theorize and come up with ways that she could still be alive. They want us to feel the grief. Why then give her such an unsatisfactory send-off? Why then treat her like a piece of meat? That's what they did. She's a piece of meat that we throw into the grinder, make Pyrrha cheese, or Pyrrha ham. I don't fucking know. That's all I have to say. I'm going to review when they go up in a few days. Cheers, and please, if you have information that will put my qualms to rest, share it. I beg you, and I thank you. And Rooster Teeth, seriously, I love you guys, but I would strongly urge you to rethink this choice, or I don't know, reanalyze it maybe. Unless, of course, I'm misinterpreting everything, and it's all just, ha ha, what an idiot on the internet.